an overview. We're going to start with the team who won the division, went all the way to the conference championship game, the Buffalo Bills. They did lose that game to the Chiefs, but it was a massive jump for them last year on the back of the man we just talked about, Josh Allen. First off, the losses. They lost wide receiver John Brown, tackle Ty Netsky. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Nasecki. Okay, there we go. I mean, I need to know that because he's now backup for the Cowboys. Tight end Tyler Croft, edge Trent Murphy, and defensive lineman Quentin Jefferson. And then on the additions, like you said earlier, they added wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders, a veteran. That's a solid addition. Tackle Bobby Hart, running back Matt Breida from the 49ers. Tight end Jacob.
He went from
from the Dolphins, and then the Niners previously is when he was last notable, I guess. And then they picked these guys up in the draft. Edge rushers Gregor Russo out of Miami, a guy who was really hyped up about a year ago, but through the COVID season started to lose some steam. And then Carlos Basham in the second round as well. Aaron, you're a big Bills believer. I know you love Josh Allen, so I'm going to turn it over to you first. How do you feel about the Buffalo Bills offseason?
Yeah, I think so. I really like what they did. I mean, like you mentioned, not really losing many people, yeah, and really address some needs. I mean, got another good wide receiver, Emmanuel Sanders. I know he's later in his career, but they may need him if one of their main guys go down. Matt Breida addressing the running back room, but also, giving Zach Moss maybe another year because I know I was high on him last year going into the year, and I was very underwhelmed by the year he had, and same thing with Devin Singletary. But yeah, I mean, taking Jacob Hollister, who was solid tight end in Seattle. I know Dawson Knox is probably going to be their main guy, but they like to do different things with that. And then, but yeah, in regards to the main thing is, we saw in the AFC Championship, couldn't really get pressure on Mahomes. That was an issue throughout the whole season. Was their front four wasn't that impressive. But just judging off preseason games, I know it's preseason, but Gregor Russo did surprise me. He's looked pretty well in preseason. I mean, he is a huge human being. I think that's also what they need, just general size. But because I remember. One reason I wasn't high on him at all going to the draft was he didn't test well. He had sat out a year and just wasn't as impressive as a guy like Jalen Phillips, who literally played in the same system on the same team. So, but yeah, he's kind of proving people wrong, at least in the preseason. So hopefully for the Bills, he can make more of an impact. And Carlos Basham's a name I've heard too. That has potential as well. So kudos to the Bills for just straight addressing the needs, and also. I didn't put this on there, but keeping Matt Milano, who is probably their best linebacker. As much as I love Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano's been better all around. So hopefully, hopefully Doug McDermott learned from last year, because remember he gave the defensive reins completely over to Todd Frazier for the first half of the season, and their defense was not good. And then I think if I remember correctly, he stepped in. Defense kind of. It didn't get amazing, but it was better. It's like we say with the Seattle, as long as it's average, you're fine. So I'd be curious if they can get back to the elite level that they were 2 years ago defensively. Because if they can, then they'll definitely. I mean, regardless, they'll still be in the Super Bowl conversation. I mean, as long as they have Josh Allen at quarterback. But it will be tough. I mean, we're going down this division. This is a very good division. This year, last year Miami came on late and New England kind of fell off late. So we'll get into them in a second. But yeah, I still expect this team to be in the playoffs. If I had to bet, I'd bet as them to win the division again. So you got a lot to look for, Buffalo. And like we mentioned earlier, Josh Allen last year was not an aberration. He is for real, and he is, like I said, in my eyes, I think he can very much still stay in this top three conversation for quarterbacks. So that's how I feel. John, are you a believer in my guy Josh Allen and his Bills?
I am, but I wasn't super ecstatic with the offseason. It just didn't feel like they necessarily made any major moves. I like the Emmanuel Sanders edition, but I was hoping maybe they would address wide receiver potentially in the draft, because I feel like they're a Stephon Diggs injury away from having a pretty terrible wide receiver group. Obviously, to my knowledge, I don't think he's really struggled with injuries throughout his career at all. So it's not like we have anything to go off of. But when you're that reliant, I think, on that one receiver being the guy, and most teams obviously have their true number one receiver, but we've seen a few other teams like the Saints, for example. Right now, Michael Thomas is hurt. There's disputes on if he even wants to be there. And so all of a sudden it's like, okay, where do we go with wide receiver? And all these young guys are having to sort of step up and fill this role to where other teams, like the Steelers, for example, if Juju Smith-Schuster gets hurt, they still have Deontay Johnson, they have Chase Claypool, they have depth behind him, right? And so I was maybe not like a top draft pick on wide receiver, but I was hoping maybe second, third round, fourth round, even that they would try to get a wide receiver in there. I don't know if they did because I don't know their
Uh,
full
th-
draft.
they didn't, but I think just sorry, quick rebuttal. I think that's where they believe Gabriel Davis, who was a rookie last year and had some moments. I think that's where they think he can step up and be better or be their number two.
Yeah, and I mean I hear it. It's just like I said, I don't know. I just feel like wide receiver is just such a deep position, especially in the draft, that it never hurts to take one right in like the third round and just take a flyer on a guy who might become a long term starter. Because Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley, they're both older veterans, so maybe you start to prepare a little bit for the future. Running back is also still just a question mark. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't have addressed it that much. I think Matt Breida signing was nice, just add depth, but you got to hope that Devin Singletary or Zach Moss really pop. Maybe the combo of them can finally like put together a solid rushing season. Because last year it wasn't good enough. It just felt like their run game was pretty weak. I mean, Josh Allen, he contributed to the run game, but those running backs, it never felt like they were really a threat to the other team. So that's the offense overall. I mean, I think when you have Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen, a pretty decent offensive line, and still solid weapons, I think they'll be fine. Defensively, I liked how they went out and addressed the defensive line. I'm hoping that at least for their sake, Ed Oliver has more of a breakout year this year. He hasn't been terrible, but for what he was billed during the draft, I just feel like I expect more out of him. I expect him to start elevating himself into one of the top defensive tackles in the league because he was a top 10 pick. And, there's a reason that, when you're a defensive tackle, you go that high. It's because you're supposed to be that kind of a guy. So I'm hoping that he can do better. And I think that if he can, along with Star Lutulele, Vernon Butler, like they have depth on the defensive line. Jerry Hughes is still there. Mario Addison's still there and now you add in Gregory Russo and Carlos Basham. I think that they have a really solid rotation. But I think we need better out of those two defensive tackles because that's going to be the anchor of your defensive line. Those guys can help stop the run. That's going to help your linebackers do a lot more. And then they have a really solid secondary. And so I just think that if their front seven can sort of dictate the game more, then their secondary won't have to be relied on as much or have more chances to be exposed because they have to cover for so long, or try to cheat up in the run game because the front seven can't necessarily handle what the other team is throwing at them. So yeah, overall, I mean, I think I like the areas they did address, but to me, it just didn't really feel like there was any sort of big flashy additions, no like huge signings that really tipped the scale in their favor when it comes to the playoffs. But like you said, with Gabriel Davis and some of these other guys, maybe that just comes from internal development and growth.
All
Anything
right.
else on the Bills?
No, I mean we can feel free to move forward to the next team here.